Thank you all for being here. Last week we watched a film about the architect, mathematician, urban planner, thinker, Christopher Alexander, who died in 2022. He was a British American, born in Austria. I think he's German ancestry, but was raised in Britain, came to America at a very early, right out of, I guess, to do his master's in architecture at Harvard. He ended up at Berkeley, taught there for I think up to 30 years. He ended up going back to Britain for the final days of his life. If you're listening online and you weren't here last week, there's a video, and our conversation today is going to be about some of the more salient comments he made in that interview, and we'll post a link to that video so that you can watch it if you're interested. As I warned you last week before we started the film, that he spoke very slowly and haltingly, and indeed, I did not lie to you, as you experienced. For some of you, it was excruciatingly slow and haltingly. For others of you, you might have enjoyed, the pause, submitting to the pause. I know one person came up to me and said that they couldn't stand him after watching that. They thought he had a lot of wonderful things to say, and they liked what he had to say, but he drove them crazy. You should know, huh? Yeah. I do. So that's the thing. I love that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I could not have scripted a better comment for what I was going to say next. For those of you who didn't hear, Linda said that that they're used to listening to their audiobooks on twice the speed, and they could have set him at 4 times the speed. So I wrestled with this when I showed the video. I wrestled for hours. It wasn't just, like a moment or two. I thought about this all day. I thought, am I going to speed this up, and people are going to get... And I listened to it because when I was working through it, I listened to it at the real time, and I've heard it before years ago, but I also listened to it at twice the speed. And you literally, at twice the speed, he sounds like he's speaking a normal speed. Or normal to slow. But it does not sound sped up. And I thought, I don't know what to do, what's the right thing to do here? And I elected not to speed it up. And my favorite person told me that they were so happy that I did not speed it up. You're my second favorite person, but you have fallen from grace now. You used to be my favorite person. But no, I wanted you to feel the angst. When we are engaging, and this is the entire point of everything we're talking about here, what we're talking about is not just taking in information or data. We're talking about an experience that involves the whole person. And this is so important. And this is so important to everything that Alexander has to say, actually. And so I did think about it, and I thought this is going to irritate probably quite a few people. And I understand, but I wanted you to feel his angst, because he has a lot of angst, if you didn't pick up on it. And that's what I want to talk about. Remember when I said I'm going to introduce you to these people, Ruskin, Alexander, and maybe one or two others? It's not just where they got it right. It's where they were struggling because they never quite had the paddles on the heart. And that's as important in our conversation where we're headed, is to identify that as where they got it right. And I think it will be a powerful aha. I mean, you all know the answer anyway. It's not going to be an aha like you don't know. But it'll reinforce the aha that you already know. And so I wanted you to feel that. I particularly wanted you to feel that excruciatingly long pause when his interviewer, who was one of his students and collaborators, who I kind of have a feeling is a strong believer, asked him questions about the structure of things and meaning. And then Christopher Alexander acted like he didn't understand the question and asked him to repeat it. And the guy repeated it using the same word. I mean, he didn't change the question at all. And then Alexander finally, like as if you were pulling some kind of thing out of the deep recesses of his soul, finally said the word God. And I think that was a very poignant moment in everything. So what we want to do today, I didn't prepare a slide, so try and stay awake, because you're going to, I could speak 4 times as fast. So I'm going to pull, I just went through, it's technology, you get the transcript right there, so that was fun. So I pulled the whole transcript up, and then I went through and edited it severely, and just pulled out some of the more important, what I thought were more important, things that he had to say. And then I think I'm going to read those, and then little commentary through them. And then hopefully we'll have time for, along the way, some discussion. I suppose you could interrupt this with some discussion, and then we could have some at the end. So he began near the beginning, he said that one of the very largest problems that is facing the earth just now is the spread of ugliness. The spread of ugliness. And then he talked about how many might consider this a trivial problem compared to the other problems that we face in society. And as Christians, we think about sin, morality, oppression, poverty, suffering. We think about these kinds of things. And then we think about ugliness, and he's speaking as an architect. He's talking largely about the building of buildings and city streets and villages and these kinds of things. And he's saying that this is actually a moral problem, and that this is impacting our ability to thrive spiritually. That's his message, whether you agree with him or not, but it's something very deep to think about. And where do we fall in that? Well, I mean, we're doing a beautification project right now. I mean, I haven't hit you up for the money to pay for this thing yet. There's a lot more coming. This is all very nice, but the real, you're going to get really hit between the eyes when we finish, because all the ornamentation is as much change as we've experienced in this room right now. Just the ornamentation, which is less in terms of sheer volume of actually covering space that we've done, the ornamentation is minuscule, but the impact is going to be exponentially more. So you'll see what's going to happen. But somebody does have to pay for it. So we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is. So that's something for us to think about. When we think about the manifest consequences of sin and evil, as I said, we think about vice and immorality and all of this sort of thing, and the destruction of the human person, the loss of meaning in our world. We think of the darkness of the intellect, like we don't know the truth, we don't have knowledge of God. But can't we classify all of that as ugliness? I mean, all of that is ugliness. And there has to be some association between all of that, the moral ugliness that we think of, the ignorance of God and of truth, somehow has to have some connection with the real physical, tangible world that we live in and create for ourselves, whether it's a building or whether it's putting together an organization. So ugliness can be manifest in the things that we make and in the structures we build. And when I say structures, I don't just mean physical structures, anything that we build. Right now, we are in the process of building a Parish Life Conference, next year. We're putting this together. And there's hundreds and thousands of little parts to put this conference together. And it could either be a good conference or a bad conference. We could be successful or not in how we're building this conference. And if they're not put together well, these things can be ugly. They can actually manifest a more destructive or unhealthy environment. He goes on to say that, now if we stop and talk about everything, we'll never finish, but that's something to think about. It's going to come back up again and again. He goes on to say that, quote, architects are contributing to it by making their particular contributions more and more fantastic so that they can be on the cover of magazines. This too, he's hinting at something. He doesn't go into a lot of detail, but what he's talking about here is this is the great sin of modernism, which denies God and denies an objective good present in that which has been made by the Creator. And along with this denial of God and the objective good in that which he has made, there is a militant rejection of what has been practiced throughout all of human history, which is a copying or recognition, a respect, a deferral to this objective good in nature, which has been used by all of human history. Whenever humans were making anything, they used it as a template. They followed the pattern that exists in nature. You following me? And that's because all of humanity has always been deist. They've always believed in God, or theism, whatever kind of God you want. They've always been theistic. So in modernism, God gets replaced by whatever, ideologies and all the rest. Or he gets sequestered into the corner, into the closet, so he becomes irrelevant. But in either case, God is replaced, and in replacing God, to be successful at that, we have to deny the fingerprint of the Logos on everything he's made. This is what the Protestantism did with Catholicism. To deny the church, the apostolic faith, they had to deny the hierarchy and the sacraments of the church. Exact same thing that modernism does in the world of art and architecture and everything else. And ideas too, by the way, philosophy. So that's what he's getting at. And it's a serious problem because he's basically saying that what drives and fuels modern art and architecture is the artist trying to play God, saying there is no such thing as good shape. There is no such thing as an objectively good pattern in nature, and that I will create, whatever I create will be good shape because I created it and because I say that it is good. Okay, that runs through our entire modern age in almost every field. And you can see how atheistic that spirit is, spirit of Antichrist, really. So that's what he's referring to in that brief little statement about, fanciful buildings. They're trying to break all the rules so that they can get on the cover of a magazine. And that's true. He goes on to say, quote, the real issue is something that I call adaptation, and that means the extent to which all the little bits, whether it be of a building or of a sidewalk or of a staircase or anything, can only be made right if it is done slowly and with care and by people who know the immediate vicinity. Another important point, and we're going to come back to this in a little more detail in a minute, but what he's saying is that if we're going to make things beautiful, we have to pay very careful attention to what we're doing and the environment, because it's dependent upon what exists already, made by God or even by other humans too, by the way. And that in addition to this, it takes time. And that's one reason I didn't speed the thing up, because it takes time. You wouldn't feel his angst if I sped it up 4 times. And that was my goal, was for you to feel the angst. If you make stew, you should make it in the morning, not an hour before you're going to eat, or the night before even. There's no way to speed that up. For this, it has to just takes time. They've spent millions of dollars. People have spent millions of dollars trying to figure out how to rapid age whiskey. I have read their doctoral dissertations on this process. I've even experimented with it. And there is a process by which you can take a very young whiskey, I mean immediately it's made, distilled one day, and within 6 weeks, you can get it to the point where it feels like it's about a year old. So you can actually achieve that. But they have, we can put a man on the moon, but they cannot figure out how to rapid age whiskey. Nobody's figured it out. It's never been done. And you can't speed up Christopher Alexander either. No. Oh, he irritates me too, I know. I speed him up at home. But when I want the full experience, I listen to it in real time. Like Arvo, I bet you don't like Arvo Part either. Has anybody ever listened to Arvo Part?
I love Arvo Part, and I've been thinking this whole time, like you spent probably 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning talking about the problem of Alexander's slow talking. And I have to say, I am literally, genuinely unable to put myself in the mental space of someone who would want to speed him up. It does not make any sense to me at all. I can't comprehend it.
Well, that makes sense to us all who know you, Alex. We understand that perfectly. If you don't know who Arvo Part or Pert or however you say his name properly is, you should go home, look him up, and listen to some of his music. He's the most recorded composer in the world. He's Orthodox. He's brilliant. He's one of the great, great, great living artists in the world today. And I highly recommend you go. Put your headphones on and sit back and just give yourself some time to relax and listen to some of his music. He's one of the great artists and great souls. He's one of the great souls in the world today, really. So get to know Arvo Part. Yeah, that was a complete aside. I was just going back. I was talking about aging whiskey. You can't rapid age certain things. Oh no! I was tying it in because we were talking about adaptation, and in order to thank you, dear. So the point here is that to do something truly beautiful, to really do something beautiful with meaning, to build something, you have to go to the site, that's been a huge problem in the past. This was my field. So architects would draw things and they were completely separate from the site. They had no sense about what was going on there. And this has been a big discussion for hundreds and hundreds of years, how the designer, a designer can design something, a stool, but he's never made a stool. And we have this problem all the time in our shop and the work that we do. The designers are designing things that don't make any sense in terms of fabrication or actual construction. And anybody in the field of making things or construction or building is extremely, you know what I'm talking about, like, seamstress, and designer. Anybody in the field, a practitioner versus the designer, this is a huge gulf that separates the two, and it creates massive problems. Whereas before this didn't exist. They were together. And there's been a movement in the last couple of decades for what you see, like if you want to go, have a house built. Now you can go to a builder and they have a design team in the building firm. It's called Design Build. And so they've started to pull these things back together. And the architects are now spending more time in the field than they used to. And they're even going out and doing, going to a dude ranch and trying to figure out how to make things so they can experience it, so they can bring that back to the drawing table as they're drawing. But he's saying that, this is necessary to, we had a big fiasco out here in the cemetery. Somebody, just looked at a piece of paper. It wasn't anybody here. It was our, former surveyor. Who was probably tipsy at the time. He just puts pens on a piece of paper to lay out the cemetery. And recently we had somebody come so we'd see where things were. And I go out there and I'm like, what the heck is this? Like, and they're like, well, that's where the cemetery is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, yeah, it's there, it's on the paper, see? And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, take those stakes out of the ground. I had somebody call me, not a part of the community, one of their poor little child's grave was halfway outside of the stakes, and they were all upset. Our child, you don't love our child. It's not in the cemetery. And I'm like, just forget that, please. You don't lay the cemetery out like that. You have to go out there. You have to walk the land. You have to see everything. You have to take everything in and the lay of it. Otherwise, the cemetery's dead, no pun intended, instead of living, And he's talking about this whole process that we have to go through. What's driving this disconnect? It's simple. What is causing us not to build things beautifully? Because of the methods that we use. What is it? It's simple. Money. It's economics, it's utilitarianism, and it's efficiency. And I'm not opposed to efficiency. I mean, I ran a business where we didn't get paid, if we didn't get product off the anvil and get it finished and in the client's hands, we didn't get paid. And I did have children to feed, And so I'm not opposed to efficiency or anything like that. But when it sort of becomes, when it's controlling everything, and it becomes out of whack, and that's our society. We have value, our values have shifted from truth and beauty, the truth of a thing, to do it right, to do it well, so that it's lasting. We have this throwaway society, and it's all about efficiency and money. And that precludes, quite often, truth and beauty and meaning in the things that we're doing and participating in. And so part of that is slowing down, is getting in the field, and adapting. Does that make sense? So that has to guide us in the decisions that we make about how we're going to do something. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So this whole thing where you have these entities that are calling the shots, which are far removed, which drives me crazy. Like, I have no patience for this whatsoever, to a fault, I have to admit. So we're designing a parish life conference right now. And there's thousands and thousands of little parts that go in to make up all the decisions. We just had a big long meeting the other day about all this stuff, the location and the food and the venue and the timing and the liturgies and the different, and who's going to do what. And we have to take all of these things and we have to submit this to some no-name bureaucratic committee in Quebec for their approval. We should take this off. Live stream. Oh, this is live stream. You can't take it off. Oh, no offense to these lovely people in Quebec. See, I don't know them. I'm sure they're wonderful, godly people. It's the principle of the thing, They have their policies and procedures, their template. It's about templates. They've got their template, and, does our plan map with their template? And they have no idea of the situation here. We're going to be using the middle school up the road. They didn't like that, but, because why can't you have it in a hotel, they asked. Well, because we can't. We're having it in the middle school. So, and then we're going to do some things here at the church in the middle school. I guarantee you, if we told them that, they were like, no, we don't think that's a good idea. But they have no idea the lay of the land, how far it is, that we have a community here that'll help people get back and forth, how we've organized the whole thing for maximum success. They're not involved in any of that. They've just got a template. And that's what they do. This committee up there, they oversee all of the parish life conferences all over the country in North America. And they've got a template. And that's it. There's an example. This is how everything works. The way I work is by asking for forgiveness instead of permission. Leah keeps telling me, she's sort of heading all this up. She says, they've got rules, Father. You just can't do that. I says, I don't care about the rules. You're going to get me in trouble. I said, no, we'll be fine. Don't worry about it. All right. So he talks about, the nature of order. This is so there was something that happened in Alexander's life. He wrote a bunch of stuff back in the 60s and 70s. I think his first book came out in late 67. And by the way, his work, he was a mathematician to start with, his work on patterns and things are the foundation of Wikipedia and of much of computer software design today, are based on the work of Christopher Alexander, actually, which is interesting to note. But he was seeing things, he was observing things, he was looking at modernism and modern architecture planning, and he knew there was something really, really wrong with it. And he began to observe nature, and he began to study it. Remember I talked about Ruskin, how Ruskin would stare at the way that a vine was wrapping around a thorn stem, or a rose stem, for hours. People thought that he was, crazy. So Alexander began to study and observe nature, and he began to see things coming together. He began to see repeating patterns, and he began to see things that were objectively, consistently there. And he wrote some books about this. His most famous book, the first book, was A Pattern Language, and it's the highest selling book on architecture in the world ever, of all time. And it's a really fascinating little book, and it's very practical. So if you're going to build a house or a garden or whatever, you can open this book up, and he just gives you like rules to follow that are patterns in nature. How deep to make a balcony, and he gives you the reason why. Like, don't make a 3-foot deep balcony; it has to be at least 6 foot deep. And why to put, you need to have windows from 2 sides in a room, in a bedroom or something, or you need to face your bed facing east, and various little rules that help to make an environment more whole and healthy and life-giving. He said, but he was struggling, he was just noticing these things, putting them down. But then he noticed people that were trying to build things according to his ideas were not being all that successful. I mean, some of it was fine, but it wasn't truly beautiful. There was still something missing, and it took many, many years. And he began to understand there was something deeper going on in the world that he began to notice. And he ended up sort of writing his magnum opus. In the film, he said when he started talking about God, he said he was starting to give in to acquiesce towards this God pull. He was a Christian, by the way. Some of you didn't realize he was, because of some of the things he said, you thought maybe he wasn't a Christian. He's actually a practicing Catholic. Now, I don't know where his personal faith was in all of that, but he was definitely a practicing Catholic. But he said he had 8 more books he wanted to write that were going to delve more deeply into the connection between God and all of these other things that he had been talking about. And I don't think he wrote any of them. I don't think any books. I don't know. There might have been one book that came after that, but I don't think they were ever written.
I think maybe the last book that he published was The Battle for the...
There was one book, the Battle book. And that was talking about how he was battling with local, ordinances and government and zoning, people and building people about a certain project that he had done. It went through his experience of that. Which is, again, another thing, adaptability. We were just talking about adaptability. So once I give the schedule for the PLC and it gets approved, like, I'm just going to change it. Like, it doesn't mean anything. like we're going to adapt. Like, we don't have this thing perfectly mapped out. We've got the basic principles and ideas, like what Thursday's going to be focused on and Friday. We have the keynote event of the whole thing is we're going to have a festival here on Friday evening that's going to be like 5 or 6 hours with a concert and lots of outdoor stuff. That's really the heart of the conference, but there's other parts of it that are key, but we don't know just how they fit. But I have to give them a schedule, and then it gets approved. And then what? But that's what the build. If I change a doorknob, if we're in here building, and we're like, no, we need to shift this a little bit. This is not working. Because there's no way, it is impossible. I work with the best designers and architects, and I mean this not hyperbole, in the world. That in our shop, we work with the best in the world. And they don't get everything mapped out from the beginning. I mean, I'm not opposed to planning. There's a place for planning. Yesterday, we were going to talk about that. There's a place for planning. We built a railing 5 or 6 stories for Cartier in New York. We spent 500 hours in the drawing phase, more than 500 hours. That was all planning. So I'm, you have to plan. That's not what I'm talking about. But even after all the planning, we still had to adapt thousands of things. And I don't care how well you plan. We live in a dynamic universe, and we live in a dynamic world, and there's all kinds of things, and we have to be open to that. It's a living, dynamic situation when we're designing and building things, including a Parish Life Conference. So, we need to have the freedom to move things around. But the county doesn't give you that freedom. If I want to move a doorknob, change a left-hand door to a right-hand door because we didn't foresee that this door is going to block the view when you're coming out, the mountains or something, I don't know, whatever. I got to go back to the county and go through like a special hearing and, weeks of, petitions to get that change made. So, again, bureaucracy. So he says, he wrote these books about the nature of order. This was his magnum opus. And what he started to see more clearly and be able to write about was just that. What is the nature of order? So this is what he's going to talk a little bit about. The nature of order. The order of things. He says the nature of order, and he's talking about the books. There's 4 books. I have them, and they're beautiful books. The nature of order is about what does it take to make the things beautiful, really and truly beautiful, in the old-fashioned meaning of the word, so that it touches you in the heart. What's involved from a practical point of view in terms of construction and so forth? What's involved from a spiritual point of view, so that you as the maker are in a sufficiently harmonious state to be able to make a beautiful thing. That's a whole nother interesting. So as the maker, are you in the right frame of mind, in the right spiritual state? Because what you make is it's gonna carry something of yourself. That's a very profound observation. So basically what's involved in making something beautiful? And for him, it's about making it right and true. He says, quote, is that you as the maker, so what's involved in this, and he began to embark on the nature of order, which had to do with not just the pattern of something, recognizing a pattern in nature, but going deeper and looking at how everything that exists, everything that has being and exists, is a structure or a system, meaning it's composed of parts. Everything is complex and composed of parts. Now, God is simple. He is not composed of parts, but even within the Godhead, according to our Trinitarian dogma, there is plurality, there is distinction. So even within God himself, God is one, and he is not composed of parts, and he is not complex. We say that God is simple. And I'm not talking about absolute divine simplicity here, but I'm just talking about the Orthodox doctrine of simplicity. And yet within God, there is distinction. There are persons. There is a plurality. That revelation of who God is reflected in nature, in everything that's been created, which is complex and made up of parts. So there's a distinction according to nature about how created things are complex things made up of parts. The uncreated God is simple, not made up of parts, and yet he has distinction and plurality within his, but the distinction is by nature, created and uncreated. Are you following me so far? So nobody's nodding yes, but all right, okay. So I just wanted to make that point so we don't get confused about, So everything that exists is made up of parts. Everything. A wolf and a wolf pack. A tree and a forest. A human being, an individual human being, and a community of human beings. Everything is made up of parts. A bee in a beehive. And what makes it a structure, or what makes it a system, is the fact that the parts are relating to one another in an order. There's order. So what are we talking about? Community, right? Communion, community, culture, all of these ideas. And they have to be well ordered to be beautiful. And so it's the thing, if you have two parts, or a million parts making up a thing, like Patrick, he's got 1 billion parts. Maybe, I don't know, how many parts, doctor, does he have? Huh? A whole lot. A whole lot of parts that make him up. And those parts, for him to be beautiful, for him to be what God made him to be functioning well, which he's a pretty good specimen, much better than his father. Those parts need to be working together. So there's something between the parts. There's something going on between this part and that part. That's substantive. That's the order. It's the space between the parts. It's not an empty space. It's the thing that holds everything together, which is special. How do we know that? Not a trick question. There's a doctrine, a dogma that tells us that immediately. What's the name of God? Well, yes, that's another good. Father. Father. Son. The definition of God is a word that describes what exists between him and the other person, the plurality in the Godhead. That he is a father. No, his identifying marker is that he is a father. He's not a father without a son. The word father is speaking to the relationship, what goes between the two persons, you see? It doesn't define him in isolation from the Son. He's defined by the Son. The Son is defined by the Father. So if God is the meaning of everything, if everything that has been made is somehow a mirror reflection of the Godhead, the same is true in everything else that exists. Everything that exists is made up of parts, and those parts create a structure or a system, and it's how they are put together and how they fit and how they relate to one another, how they function together, that either makes them broken, if they're not doing it well, and ugly, or makes them beautiful and giving a sense of loveliness and wholeness. And this can be, premarital counseling curriculum. It could be good or it could be bad. We're getting ready to do one right now, so we're working on it. But it also could be, a bench or a city street, or the way that trees are planted in a certain order in the garden. Because when I said everything, I mean everything. Like literally everything. Has the capacity to be put together well or not put together well. And it's our task to be concerned about putting it together well. He says, I've come to the conclusion that in order to set our ideas about architecture straight, and in order really to establish a clear picture of what we're doing when we build, it's necessary to make changes in our conception of how the physical universe is put together. That actually the order of space, here he says it. The order of space is prior to the issue of function. That is a very interesting observation that goes flies right in the face of modern design. Form follows function. He's saying just the opposite. The order of space is prior to the issue of function. That is, in other words, although functional issues are overwhelmingly important, the root matter has to do with the order of space, and that there are ways of getting hold of that issue which are so deep that they cover the functional issues, but they turn out to be more fundamental, and in fact they have the ornamental stuff and the formal stuff as byproducts of them. Did you catch that? So he says the order of space is prior to the issue of function. And that this order of space, when you get that right, what he's saying, it covers the functional issues. When you get the priorities right, this is what I refer to in our work as controlling factors. So we're here, working in here, trying to beautify things and make them beautiful, and there are controlling factors. So it's helpful to us to identify, sometimes it's a little haphazard, because, time and money and ability, but we do our best. You try and pick the controlling factors. We got into this big, long discussion about the Parish Life Conference. We're trying to design 4 days, and we're all over the place. Everybody's talking about this and talking about that, and I'm about to lose my mind. And let's stop. We've got to determine the controlling factors. What do we start with? What are the most important things? What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to achieve in this conference? And we established that, and then we began to do that. And we said, this is critical, and this is critical. And then we started to identify the critical controlling factors. Then all of a sudden, things started falling into place. And then we realized that maybe we missed something, we had to shift something, and once we shifted it, all the things that weren't making sense, they all just fell like dominoes right into place. And we walked away, not with a perfect plan, but with something I felt very good about. I was like, we just nailed, we got it, we got 85% of this nailed down. It was a beautiful exercise. The same thing is going on here. So we put these, we decided to put these in, to put our statues up, and we thought, this was always part of the plan. That's why this came like this. I had always planned on putting something here, just never got around to it. And we thought, let's put this here, we'll put our statues up, and I had these columns left over, and it creates a little bit more of a sense of mystery and space, because when you divine space, that's important. And so it gives a little bit more sense of mystery and space for the Holy of Holies. That's what this is. From here forward, that's actually called the sanctuary. This is the chancel. So that's kind of the Holy of Holies. In the Eastern Rite Church, this would actually be the solea. The iconostasis would not be there in an Eastern Church. It would be here, correspondingly. That makes sense. Okay. So we put these in. And then I told Deacon Jason, I said, let's run the plaster all the way up to the edge. And we were in here looking, and he's like, I really think that needs a wood casing around there. And I said, you're right. So we started thinking about a wood casing. And at first, it was just going to be like a casing on a door, nice and wide, but something bigger out here, and like on a door that you'd see on a door. And we'd go around it and stain it, and that'd be it. And then it started to evolve. And it turned into a pillar, kind of a pillar. It's not made yet, we're going to make it. And then we're thinking, what are we going to put on it? And I thought, let's paint something on it. I love painted wood, which actually drove because the Orthodox is not anywhere near done yet, because that's going to get all gilded and painted. So what are we going to paint on? Let's paint something botanical, not geometric. Something there's a whole history about why you do botanical stuff in the church. And then I found a depiction. Very often in crucifixion scenes in an iconography, you'll see a sun and a moon depicted. In fact, on our altar cards, you can't see it. There's a sun and a moon next to Christ, the crucifixion scene. And I ran into this medieval example of how in botanical drawings they would incorporate a sun and a moon. And I found this tree. It's a very highly stylized tree. And it's got little, it's a trunk and very stylized, simple, with the branches coming off, and it's got little circles at the end of the branches. And then there's another tree next to it, exactly the same, except for circles, it has crescents. And at the top of each one, at the top of one is the sun, and the top of one is the moon. And it's brilliant. So that's what we're putting here. We're putting where the sun goes on that side. It always goes on the right of Christ. And so there'll be a tree with the sun at the top, gilded, and a tree with the moon at the top, gilded. And we're trying to figure out what to do here. And I already had an idea of, like, we're going to come out to this point, and we're going to strike an arc all the way around. So it'll go up to the top of the window, the bottom of the window, this arc. And we're going to bring the blue out. So it's going to be on the face with the stars. We're going to have stars and everything. The blue is going to come out, so the sky is going to be creeping out into the nave and going up. And the arc is going to have a gold gilt trim around it. A physical one, not just painted on the wall. And all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute. We've got the sun and the heavens. And then the sky. And then that arch grew to this big. It's going to be this big, all gilded, with seraphim in it. Anyway, the point is, all of this was like a process of adaptation, of growing. And you know, Deacon Jason's like, would you just make your mind up? No, I'm just teasing. But, sometimes you say like, this is how this works, you know? I'm not opposed to planning, and I'll admit, there's some people who are better at planning, there's some people who are better at, responding. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just a personality type, because we had to plan a lot in our business too. We have to do things well and make things. But there's still this process of adapting, because it's a living experience. Even the process is living. And if you don't understand that, you know what you do? You'll kill it. You'll just kill everything. You just kill it to death. And then it'll be dead, and then you'll just be kicking the dead thing the whole time. And it's no fun either. And you don't get a good product most of the time. Alex, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I can't help but think that Alexander's thoughts about function following form that you read quoting from the interview, and then everything we've just been expounding on just now is all really downstream of seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. That's really what all of this is that's the form, and the functions come out of that.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling what he's saying there.
Yeah.
Because he's saying that Jesus made these trees. Well, he does believe that, by the way. He doesn't get into it much until later in life. But that's what he's saying. Even if he doesn't know that's what he's saying, that's what he's saying. He is actually talking about, in Orthodox theology, what we would call the divine image, the doctrine of divine images and a logos cosmology, which probably Dimitri, now Saint Stanislaw, taught most brilliantly about the 20th century of any theologian I know. And that's all Alexander's talking about. He has no idea that's what he's saying. None. He said, I found other stuff that he had written. He said, I grew up Catholic. He said, I didn't come to any of these ideas through my Catholic faith. He came to all of them through scientific observation, which is fascinating. He's coming at these things, and so did others, Barry and other people. They're coming at these revelations, which are truly deeply profound insights from observation, not from holy tradition, not from having received the faith and the dogma through revelation, but through observation. And I'm getting ahead of myself because at the end of all of this, I want to talk about what happens to the people who come at these things from holy tradition versus to the people who come at them from observation, scientific observation. And there's a problem with both sides, actually. There's a tendency, there's a latent, inerrant risk or problem with both sides. And I want to identify what those are so that we can think deeply about that. What I'm hoping that we could do here in this community is that we could avoid, now we're coming at it from Holy tradition, and a little bit of observation too, but I want us to be able to smash all this together and avoid the inherent problems to either approach. And when I'm talking about these thinkers, at the end, when I get done, it's going to be obvious the problems that they have by coming at it from sheer observation. They never quite get the paddles on the heart. None of them. And they really end in angst. Those of us who come at it from revelation, from theology, philosophy, an Orthodox doctrine, we get it abstractly and conceptually, but when I look around me in our present day and age, we don't actually take what we believe, the abstract concept, seriously enough to actually have it affect the way we actually do things. That's our problem. Does that make sense? Are you following me? So we can talk all we want, write our books and talk, but I walk into a $7 million Orthodox church and they got drywall on the walls with paint. It's a crying shame. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's the worst part. My dad said we put drywall in chicken coops. He wouldn't even put it in his house. And for an Orthodox priest, another Orthodox priest, to hear me say this, they think I was crazy. He would literally think I was crazy. What are you getting all worked up about? What does that have to do with the kingdom of God and morality and feeding the poor? He wouldn't have a clue what I was talking about. So there's a disconnect from both sides. Now, I think we're better off coming at it from revelation, but still, I want to smash these things together and make sure they have the right relationship to each other. All right, we're almost done. We're actually not almost done, but we're almost out of time. But this whole thing about, let me wrap up with this thought. Okay, we're on the top of page 3, and I have 9 pages. So if you're enjoying this, we'll continue next week. If you write to me an email and say we didn't enjoy it, then we'll just move on. Function follows form. Oh, I know where it's. What does he say? Because the dictum, form follows function. Yes. So you decide what you need something to do, and then that dictates the form. And what he's suggesting here is a radical idea, and it's because of his logos cosmology. He believes that if we pay attention to the way that God has put things together, they are inherently divinely good. And if we put things together the way that he has put things together, that out of that will flow, that things will then function properly. And he says that even the ornament will just naturally evolve out of that. That's what he's sort of suggesting here. It's a really interesting observation. Okay, we should stop there. Yes. Yeah, we've got a couple minutes for comments or something.
I just keep thinking about your decision to play that in real time, because how can you follow through with that function without the space to hear? And we have to be able to listen to things in real time in order to change the plan to his plan. So I just keep thinking of, and this is other covering 2.5x listener. You have to listen in real time.
Yeah. How does that compare to how does God view us?
Right.
Like how does this reflect our life, our interaction with God, the Holy Spirit in our life? What is your biggest frustration in life? That God doesn't get a move on. Right? Seriously? That he doesn't just explain everything to you? Let's just get on with it? Why can't we just be, Lord, if you would just tell me, am I supposed to take the job, not take the job, marry the girl, not marry the girl, go here, go there. Just make it plain. I'm ready. I'll do it. Just make it clear for crying out loud. Right? Does he? Ever? No. He makes you suffer because he's Russian. God is Russian. See, the Russian Orthodox Church was right. You can't truly be Orthodox if you're not Russian. No, think about how we're talking about how God is created. How do the divine energies work in our life? How does God work in your life?
Can you connect the dots with what you were saying in the beginning about his kind of anxiety?
Yeah, so, thank you, Robin. I am going to end with that in weeks ahead. That is the punchline, but I'll give a little trailer right now. That has to do with him coming from the position of observation. He is seeing truth. He has a revelation. He has insights. Him and Ruskin, off the charts. They saw things. But they didn't ever get to where they saw the thing. They saw the way things should be. For Alexander, it's focused in one area. For Ruskin, it's a similar area, but kind of different. For Wendell Berry, it's another area, but it's still just as important. Stability of community in place and relationships, just as important as a beautiful building, more important. But they all ended frustrated. They were all frustrated. And we all feel that frustration. We all feel the angst that we witnessed in Christopher Alexander. All of us, we feel it. And we feel it because we live in Babylon. This life, our elder brother has been resurrected. He has given us the Spirit. We receive his body and blood. We experience in some measure the delights and glory of his victory. And yet, we are still going to die. We're still sick. We're still fighting sin. The demons still roam about seeking to devour us. And, it's the wise man. Vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And we feel it. And that's depicted in the scriptures by us being in Babylon. When Israel went to Babylon for 70 years, that's a lifetime. They were in Babylon stands for our experience in this life, even as we are Christians waiting for the fulfillment and the resurrection and the full payoff. And that feeling of angst, that feeling of melancholy, which God put the Irish on the earth to basically give expression to, which they do beautifully. Thank you, Simon. They give voice to our melancholy angst. Guess what? It is never going away. But Alexander and Ruskin, there is something that kind of makes it go away. So Alexander thought that we are going to destroy civilization if we keep building strip malls. And he might be right about that, But anyway, for him, the solution, like Barry, is ridiculous. It's not going to happen. The solution for Alexander is to get all the architects around the world to start building beautiful things. No, I'm sorry to tell you, our civilization is just going to get destroyed. It's going to happen. And so, but he hinged his mental health and emotional health was pinned on the hope that maybe, his head's in the sand, that I can just get everybody around the world to start building beautiful things and we'll save civilization. It's not going to happen. And because he saw a part of it, but that was the angst. And it was Ruskin, that's why Ruskin ended in a dark place. The same reason. And why I wonder where Wendell Berry's head is at these days, because he thinks what he thinks and it's never going to happen. We have something different. We are where they are. We have all of that. We have all of that problem. seeing the way things should be. As a priest, I sit here, I have a vision, I have a dream of a community where everybody's doing everything they're supposed to be doing, and we're all just living in this perfect harmony. And if we would do that, that God would pour out his glory upon us in a measure that we couldn't imagine. I actually believe that's true. But most of the time, I realize it's never going to happen. Huh? Because it's not. So maybe in little pockets, but if it does happen, it'll be over. It'll end. No, it's true. I can say it. Jesus said it. This is the reality. Jesus said it. Jesus said it. He said in this, he said, I mean, we're going to get, we're in Babylon. The kingdom, the eschaton doesn't come now. We have one foot in the eschaton in a way, but we're in Babylon. But, here's the answer. That's what I'm saying. Our answer, the reason we actually do have hope, there is a way in which we can realize the eschaton in the midst of Babylon, in a way that gives us peace of mind. Despite this situation that's not going to change. And it's the Eucharist. And it's prayer. And it's not any more complicated than that. It's the sacrifice of the Mass, it's the divine office, and our life of prayer. When we make that the center of our life and of our community, and that is the heartbeat of who we are. And it wasn't for Alexander and Ruskin and Barry and so many others. They ended in darkness, in frustration. And the only way to alleviate that in this world, in Babylon, is through the miracle of and the sacrifice of the Mass and our life of prayer. And you all know that. You all know that. Every single one of us here has times in our life, in fact, it's probably more often than not for some people, where they're unhappy, discontent, frustrated, feeling like they're stuck, feeling like life is passing them by and they're never able to really enjoy it, sink their teeth into it, really, experience the present moment. Everything, they feel like they're in a rat race. And this is not just, by the way, and this is very important, and I've said this so many times here because we have a church full of people who are taking real steps to try and live a more humane life, which basically translates as chickens. Everybody's got chickens. You know what I mean. That's the symbol. We all got chickens, right? Because we're trying to live a humane life. But everything else too. So we're all trying. Guess what? You can do all that stuff. You can do all, and I think you should. I think it's important. You can do all that stuff and still have all the same feelings of discontent, life's passing you by. Just having chickens in a garden is not a magic solution. You should have chickens in a garden if you can and want to, and that will help. But what you have to have the Mass. You have to have community. You have to have what the Mass means, all of the theology of that, and your prayer life. You have to have that intimacy with God in the context of a local Eucharistic community. That is the secret. That leverages your chickens so that you can get real joy out of your chickens. So you can feel like you really are present with your kids, that you're really deriving some satisfaction and joy out of your work and your marriage and your friends and your life. It's your intimacy with Christ and his body that leverages all those other things. Now, if you have intimacy with Christ and his body and you have a hateful, dehumanizing life, it's better than not having intimacy with Christ. But we want all of it. And so that's his angst. His angst was he saw, he had like some fleeting vision of glory, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. And the best he could do was to think that if we could build beautiful buildings, we could save civilization. And he's just missing it, even though it's really important to build beautiful buildings. That's where, when you get the bill, you'll see how important I think it is.
That's one of the reasons why he talked so slowly was because he couldn't put his finger on it.
Yeah, that's the point.
He really wanted to say it.
That's the point. That's the angst. It's the pausing. You can watch him wrestling with this stuff. That was filmed in 2008, and his wife, I just found his wife's email address. She still runs the organization that he founded out in California. So I'm going to try and get a hold of her, maybe interview her, because I would love to find out some more personal, I don't know if she would share them, details about his faith and things towards the end. Because he did say, I found numerous writings that came later, and he talks about how he's feeling more comfortable talking about God and his understanding of God and everything, his other thoughts, which I think would be fascinating. Anyway. All right, we're over, so